My most watched video on YouTube is about how Indian guys won't ask you out on Hinge. And the truth is that Indian guys won't ask you out at all. They won't ask you out on Hinge. They won't ask you out organically. They won't ask you out on Bumble. They won't ask you out. And it's not about you. So in this video, we're going to talk about why Indian guys won't ask you out online or offline, what to do if you want to marry an Indian man, and how you can get an Indian husband despite us operating in a market where Indian men don't ask women out. My name is Malaika Neri. I am, of course, born and raised in India, but I've also lived all over the world. I have 20 years of dating experience in many different cultures, many different languages. I've lived in 10 countries at this point, 15 cities around the world. I speak 10 languages fluently. And I have helped high achieving women, Indian and other nationalities, for the past 7 years to find the right guy for marriage and family. And I can also help you find your husband. So many of my students want to marry Indian men. My students who are Indian, my students who are not Indian, many of them want to marry Indian men. All of them expect the man to do the basic requirement of asking the woman out. This is our standard definition of chivalry. But I have found, both having tried Hinge in India, Hinge outside India, having lived among Indians outside India, having lived amongst Indians in India, obviously, having lived in India in big cities, in small cities, having been around Indian men, British Indian, French Indian, Indian American, whatever. Indian men just don't ask you out. It was extremely baffling. Extremely baffling. I consider myself a logical, rational person. And I also spent my teenage years in the US, where if a guy likes you, he'll say, "Hey, want to grab a beer?" And translation, "Will you go out with me?" And I didn't even like beer, but I would just say, "Sure." And then I moved to Europe, and if a guy likes you, he'll say, "Shall we grab a drink? I'd love to take you out. I'd love to invite you to dinner." It's a little more formal. Same message. "I'd like to take you out." And then he takes you out, and then he pays. And no matter what, this never, I repeat, never happened with Indian guys. So I went to NYU, which is in New York City, 50,000 students, right? Among them, there are several Indians, but not a single Indian guy asked me out. And I've always had the same accent that I have now. Now it's like a bit more modulated, but back then I probably sounded even more Indian. And Indian men just never asked me out, like ever. Ever. I think in my entire life, I've been asked out by one Indian guy, and I'm going to explain how I engineered it. I made it happen. It didn't happen because he liked me. I made it happen. So let's establish a fact. Indian men don't ask women out. So all my students, they're like, "Oh, do I need to be more attractive? Do I need to lose weight? Do I need to look different? Do I need seduction skills? Blah, blah, blah." No, nothing you do is going to change Indian men or any men. Like, you are not going to change how Indian men think and operate. The fact is, people behave based on how their environment has trained them to behave. The theoretical word for this is socialization. So in the United States, people think it's normal to walk around carrying a firearm, a gun. Like, in any other country, this is considered crackpot. It's considered a crime. But in the United States, it is normal because of socialization, right? Americans are trained to think it's normal to carry a gun into a restaurant. It's completely illegal. And so in India, men are trained from a very young age that mommy and daddy are going to find you your wife, and you shouldn't talk to girls. So I've noticed when I'm in public spaces that men, even if they want to talk to me, they won't. I remember being on a train when I was in my 20s. I traveled all over India by myself, and I was sitting on a train. The compartment was completely empty. This guy came and he sat opposite me. it's empty, right? There was enough space to sit for 12 people. It's completely empty. He sat on the opposite side, really far away from me. And then he started talking to me and he was asking me all these questions about my life. And in my mind, I was like, what the heck does he want? But this is how an Indian guy will behave if he likes you. He won't like initiate direct contact. He won't say, hey, you're beautiful. Hey, I'd love to talk to you. Hey, you seem so interesting. I really like you. He'll just like be really awkward because his entire life he has been socialized to not talk to girls, not talk to women. And a lot of this is things that I have understood from talking to Indian guys. Indian men won't come up to you and say, hey, I was told my whole life not to talk to women and now I'm suddenly going to talk to you. They won't say that. Nobody will say that. But having spoken to so many Indian men and worked with Indian men, I've begun to understand this, and also reading more about like how things operate, especially in small towns. I also didn't know anything about this because my parents met at a party, and then my dad got my mom's number. At that time, nobody had personal phones, so he got the number of the accommodation where she lived, and he asked to speak to her. So he like had to go through 3 people to speak to her, and then he was like, "Can we meet?" So he asked her out, and I didn't know about arranged marriages growing up because my parents didn't have one. I didn't know about like the fact that most of the time Indian men won't ask you out. But even my parents were introduced by their friends. They didn't meet on the street. It wasn't random. They were introduced by their friends, and it happens that they're of the same exact community. My grandparents didn't know each other personally, but they knew about each other. So again, it wasn't the traditional situation where you just meet someone at a party. It's like they were introduced by their friends who said, you two are the same community. You two are both single. You two seem to have something in common. Like, and what they had in common was that their best friends were married. So like this couple who were married, my dad knew the couple and my mom knew the woman, and then they introduced my parents, and then my parents got married. So again, it followed that traditional Indian, we meet through introductions. So if you don't have that, Indian men are unlikely to ever ask you out. Now, we've covered a little bit about why. I'm happy to do a video more into like the history and psychology of Indian men, but I would suggest we not spend our time there, simply because trying to understand why Indian men won't ask out women is an exhausting topic. It drives me nuts. I don't think that it's like an acceptable situation that in 2026 a man is sitting at home thinking my mommy is going to find me a wife. Like, I've met so many men like this where they will literally tell me, yeah, I'm looking for a wife, my parents are looking, and they're like 40 years old. I'm like, dude, get it together, like take charge of your life. And these men, many of them never find wives because they are not high initiative men. They're LCMs, low capacity men. So they are the kind of women who rely on other people to take initiative. They don't ask women out, they don't talk to women, they don't make plans, they don't take initiative. And maybe they had overbearing, domineering parents. I don't know. But so what? Move on, right? So we're not going to like go into a deep dive of why Indian men don't ask women out. We want to switch to Indian men are not going to ask you out, not on Hinge. Like, I've literally matched with 1,000, 1,000 Indian men on Hinge. 0 asked me out. Whereas if I go on a dating app in Paris, within a few days, no, within 24 hours, a guy will ask me out. That's the difference. It's day and night. It's like day on planet Earth and night on planet Jupiter. Like Indian men, even if you swipe on 1,000 men on Hinge, they just won't ask you out. It's not going to happen because they don't have that socialization, but also they haven't woken up to, I have to find my own wife. Nobody's coming to save me. So they just don't. And the women I know who've married Indian men have told that guy, let's get married. Or they have gone and kissed the guy and they have said, this is the ring I want. This is the day I want to get married. There's an entire Netflix show about it called One Fine Day. It's about how women had to push their boyfriends to set a wedding date after 12 years of a committed relationship. Don't do that. So these men are like socialized to be LCMs, low capacity men. They don't take initiative. They don't ask women out. I'm not interested in these kind of men because I think it makes a woman exhausted to marry a man like that. But what do you do if you want an Indian husband and they're not going to ask you out? I'll cover in a separate video if you want more information of like, will an Indian guy marry me if I'm not Indian? Because like, yes, many will, and many of my male cousins are married to non-Indian women. So it's not a block. If you will take initiative and say, I want to get married to you, let's set a date, like he will marry you. So I'm happy to cover that. Just comment below and let me know, and I'm happy to make a video about it. But otherwise, you should know that if you want to marry an Indian man, you have to set the timeline. So if you want to know what is the right timeline for you, go grab my AI marriage prompt below, which tells you the full timeline of your personal life. It will literally tell you when you're going to meet the right guy for you, when you're going to fall in love and get engaged. But also be aware that you have to drive this process with an Indian guy. He is not going to magically wake up one day and say, let me go to a jewelry store and buy her a ring. You are going to have to take him to that jewelry store and select the ring yourself, and then say, now pull out your card and pay for it. Because Indian men are socialized from a young age that mommy and daddy take care of everything. And I've seen this in all Indian guys across all cultures, whether it's Europe or the US or India or Australia. They're all the same, and I couldn't tell you why, except that this is how they seem to be socialized. Like, it baffles me because I'm not that way myself. And what I have understood is that Indian men are like, society allows them to be like this because in India there is help. You have people who will do things for you, and you have women. So for centuries, and I saw this also with my own family, with like the millions of Indians who I have observed in India, women will compensate for a low capacity Indian male by just doing things and letting him take credit. No comment. So if you want to marry an Indian man, you have to go after him. You will probably have to kiss him first. You will have to ask him out, or you will have to tell him where you want to go, which brings us to the one Indian man in my entire 30 plus years on the planet who actually asked me out. How did I make it happen? Because let me remind you, I made it happen. So we met at a coffee shop. We met organically. He was with his friends. I started talking to them. I caught his eye and I smiled. And I was reading a book and he said, hey, what are you reading? So fair point. He asked me a question, but I smiled at him. I caught his eye. I stared at him for 10 minutes until he looked at me. And he was attractive. Like, he was cute. He wasn't, the most attractive guy in the world. He was just a nice, cute guy. And his friends had gone outside to smoke, and I smiled at him. He said, what are you reading? Then we started talking. And I said, I really love coffee. I love coffee shops. So I come to this coffee shop because I love their coffee. So we got talking about coffee. He told me about another coffee shop. And I said, I've never been there. I've never tried it. And he said, you should try it. So then, this was the master stroke. I repeated about 25 times, I would love to try that coffee shop. And every time he kept saying, yeah, you should. And I said, I would love to. 25 times I said it. 25 times. I would love to try that coffee shop. That sounds so great. I would love to go there. Yeah, that sounds awesome. I love trying new places for coffee. I love it. I love it. I love it. 25 times. And then him and his friends came back. They finished smoking. They came back inside. They decided to leave. They paid. They left. And then right as they were leaving, because I'd said 25 times, I would love to try this coffee shop you suggested, he said, hey, maybe I can get your number. So he got my number, didn't ask me out in person. And then a few hours later, he sent me a message saying, hey, what are you doing tonight? How about I take you to that coffee shop? So last minute, which normally I wouldn't tolerate, but I said, yeah, sure. And he took me to that coffee shop, and that ended up being our first date. But ladies, I made it happen because 25 times I gave him reinforcement. Then I gave him my number. Then I accepted a last minute date, which I don't recommend. According to the book, The Rules, which was published in the 60s or whatever, always make a man wait 2 days. So I should have done that. But in this scenario, I didn't. I said, let me give it a go. And as I got to know him, he turned out exactly to be the low capacity man that he was from day one. Like, he didn't take initiative. He had no vision for the relationship. And of course, like, it fizzled out before it began. Because fundamentally, he was a low capacity man, and low capacity men don't take initiative. So I'm not saying all Indian men are low capacity men. I really don't have enough experience to make that statement. But I am saying that Indian men are socialized not to ask women out, and the vast majority of them will never ask you out. No matter how successful or wealthy or attractive they may be. You have to take it into your hands if you want an Indian husband. So we've covered the fact that Indian men will not ask you out, online or offline. And even when I had my Hinge profile, like I literally wrote the way to get, like Hinge has these questions you can add. And so one of the questions was the way to get to ask me out is, and I wrote proposed date, time, location. And I think one guy said, oh, what about this? Like he didn't even say, I'd love to take you out. What about these dates? He said, what about this? So like they don't even know. These boys, I call them boys because in my mind a man knows how to ask a woman out, but these boys don't even know how to ask a woman out. Like they literally don't know. But they also aren't studying from the vast quantity of dating material on the internet how to ask a woman out. They're not putting in effort. Like in an Indian man's mind, it's not I'm going to invest in my dating skills because I'm single and I'm 35 years old. It's women are so difficult these days, externalizing blame, right? So if you're a woman, whether you're Indian or you're any other nationality, and you want an Indian husband, you have to make it happen. Just like if you want to go to medical school, no medical school is going to email you 25 times until you say, I accept your offer and I will show up next September. No, you have to apply. You have to take the entrance exams. You have to get the right scores. You have to pay the application fee. You have to call them to double check if they got your application. You have to wait until they eventually send a letter telling you whether you got in or not. It's the same with finding an Indian husband. You have to do the vast majority of the work, including planning the wedding, planning the engagement ceremony, telling him what ring you want. And this isn't just for Indian men. It's for a lot of men. Like being low capacity is not an Indian problem. It's not a cultural issue. I've met low capacity men and dated low capacity men from a variety of nationalities, but I will never do it again because who did all of the work? Who reserved the restaurants? Who made the bookings? Who planned the holidays? Who took responsibility for the relationship moving forward? Me. And I'm fed up with that. So a man asking a woman out is the very first interaction. If a man can't do that, how the heck can he plan a life with you? The answer is simple. He cannot. He will not. And so a low capacity man who can't ask you out will not plan a life with you. You will do the planning. And that is what every woman I know who married a low capacity man does. That is exactly what I did when I was dating low capacity men. These aren't bad people. They're just low capacity men. And if you're a high capacity woman, you've got a big career, you've got a big life, you travel a lot, you want to do a lot of things in life, you want a man who can lead, this is not your guy. So again, Indian men won't ask you out, and a lot of Indian men are low capacity men. And being a low capacity man is not an Indian issue, but it's a non-cultural issue. And a man asking you out is the first indicator of his capacity to take leadership in a relationship. So final point, what do you do if you want an Indian guy to ask you out? You set the terms. I would, just as I did with that Indian guy, I said, I would love to go to this place. And then he said, are you free tonight? And I said, yes, even though it was last minute. Like I planned my calendar in advance. I don't accept last minute invitations from anyone. I made an exception for him. Wasn't the right thing to do, but I did. And so that was how I got a date on my calendar with an Indian guy. He picked me up. He drove me there in his car. He paid. I said what I want. He paid. And then he drove me home before my bedtime. But I set the terms. I told him 25 times I would love to go. And only when he was 98% certain that there would be zero chance of rejection, that is when he asked me out and proposed the location, because I made it safe for him. So I guess that is the whole point of this video, is that an Indian man will only ask you out when you make it 98% certain for him that you will say yes to whatever idea he proposes, and then you take it from there. But again, you are going to have to lead if you want an Indian husband. And everything I've observed and studied, both in my students and in my own life experience, has confirmed this 1,000 times and more. You will have to make an Indian guy ask you out, propose to you, marry you. You will have to organize it, and you'll get an Indian husband out of it, but you'll be leading every aspect of the relationship for the rest of your life. So fair warning.